A 15-year-old boy in Toronto was shot dead by a classmate on Monday. The suspect is said to have ties to a gang. Joining me now to talk about it is Toronto journalist Brian Lilley. Brian, as the shooting news was spreading, our PM's Public Safety Minister Bill Blair was discussing the need to seize rifles from licensed gun owners.
A bit of a bizarre stretch for Public Safety Minister Bill Blair, but that's where the Trudeau government wants to go because they don't really know how to deal with people like those that killed 15-year-old Cefalo Kasari. He's 15-year-old student. He's leaving. It happened at 3:10 p.m. Hal. Busy intersection in the Scarborough East End of Toronto. Kids walking home from school, headed toward a bus stop, and shots rang out. A 15-year-old is dead, and a 15-year-old is in custody. Young Mr. Kasari, police say they have no interactions with him ever. They've never talked to him. The euphemism, known to police. He's not known to police, but the person they have in custody is, and in fact, there are gang ties. What do we know about gun use in Canada? Is that most of the homicides that are committed with firearms are committed by gangs. Most of the gang guns that are used are smuggled in from the United States. What is the Trudeau government's answer to the gun crime, whether it's dealing with Cefalo Kasari's death or any other? It's to say, well, we know where the licensed gun owners are. Let's take their guns away from them, and that will make it look like we're doing something. That is not the answer here. Taking away somebody's AR-15 or their, Ruger Mini 22 is not the answer to this situation. It's dealing with guns smuggled into the border. It's dealing with guns and gang units, whether we're talking about, Toronto or Ottawa or Surrey, British Columbia or Calgary. You talk about any major city. These are the issues that they're dealing with. Talk to police chiefs across the country, and they'll say in rural areas, yeah, it may be different, and maybe long guns are the issue. But and regularly they're stolen from somebody's home. But in the urban centers where the majority of the gun crime is happening, it's not where the Liberals are looking. And for them to be doing this at the same time as a 15-year-old has died as the result of another 15-year-old who has gang ties, this is deeply disturbing.
Yeah, go after the crime, definitely. The Canadian government, Brian, is offering financial assistance to the families of those who were killed when Ukrainian International Flight 752 was shot down. I think it's $25,000 per family. Brian, you say this is the right thing to do, despite Ottawa receiving some backlash.
Yeah, and look, Hal, that I am not a big fan of Justin Trudeau, and I can be a harsh critic of him. But for the most part, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has handled this well. Maybe in a minute or two, we'll get into where he made a sidestep that wasn't the best move. But when it comes to offering what I'm calling assistance for the families, because the government called it compensation, a lot of people took issue with that. They said Iran should be compensating. Well, Prime Minister Trudeau made clear, yes, Iran should be compensating. But, the mullahs in Tehran aren't going to be coughing up money anytime soon. And what we have are 57 Canadian citizens and 29 permanent residents who were blown out of the sky just trying to come home. And the government is saying, we'll offer $25,000 in assistance to the families. What will that cover? That will cover a funeral. That will cover some air travel if you need to go and recover body parts, because you're not even bringing back a body at this point. That will cover hotel rooms. That will cover maybe some legal costs. This isn't compensation for losing your loved one. This is some help. In the meantime, I've had people say to me everything from, well, you should have travel insurance. Well, that may not kick in, because how do you prove that your loved one was on the plane? How do you prove that they're dead? Is there a death certificate? Is Iran going to cough that up anytime soon? They've got immediate needs now, and I don't have an issue with this. The other problem that I have with some of the backlash that the Trudeau government is facing is people saying, well, these are hyphenated Canadians. Why were they going there? Well, my parents are immigrants. My parents came to this country in 1968 from Scotland. They still go back to visit family. And that's what many of these people were doing. They were going over during the Christmas vacation to visit family. Whether they're Christians or not, they were going at that time to visit family. And tensions were not ratcheted up when they went there. They were when they left, but they weren't when they went there. and they were blown out of the sky. It's not their fault. Why should their families have to suffer? Why are we saying these are hyphenated Canadians? They're not real Canadians. Nobody would say that about my family, and my parents still have accents. They, could travel on two passports. They don't, and I'm betting that a lot of the Iranian Canadians that were on that flight only traveled on their Canadian passport, even though Iran doesn't recognize dual citizenship. We need to put this aside and support those in our communities who are suffering.
And Brian, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau seems to have gone back and forth as to who's to blame for the shooting down of Flight 752. He blamed Trump, and now he's blaming Iran again.
Well, originally he blamed Iran, and then, there's a lot of pressure from the media and probably from people within his own party to say, well, no, this is because Trump escalated tensions in the region. And a lot of media questions, primarily driven by CBC, but not exclusively. But they're the biggest outlet, and they kept pushing this. This is because of Trump. This is because of Trump. And then he was sitting down and he was doing an interview in Vancouver with Global, and he said, well, it's because of tensions. And then he was asked again, well, are you saying this? And he said, well, it's because of tensions. And he seemed to be trying to spread blame around. That didn't sit well. And I can tell you 100% he heard from the Iranian Canadian community en masse saying, don't you dare try and blame this on anyone except the regime in Tehran, because those are the people that blew our families out of the sky. Iranian Canadians came here for a reason, Hal. They came here to escape the despotic regime that they fled from. And they're not willing to sit there and listen to someone say, oh, well, you attacked a terrorist who has led to death and destruction in Syria, in Lebanon, in Yemen, in Iraq. They're not willing to sit there and say, well, because you killed him, it's okay to kill Canadians. They're not willing to listen to that. So Justin Trudeau heard from those people loudly and clearly, and then, just before last weekend said, no, Iran is clearly to blame. I give him kudos for saying that at the beginning. I hit him in the middle when he was waffling, but I'll give him kudos again. Iran is the only place to put blame on this.
Jean Chrétien's former chief of staff has become the latest Liberal to say Canada should trade Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou for the two Michaels being detained in China, and it's a move that Trudeau has outright rejected.
Yeah. Okay, you're going to be shocked again. I'm going to give kudos to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. But why on earth would we be sitting here saying, let's do a prisoner swap? This isn't the Cold War. China is supposed to be someone, a country that we trade with, a country that we have a lot of exchanges with, and suddenly they're going to kidnap our people to get one of theirs back. We have Meng Wanzhou in custody because of an extradition treaty with the United States. China desperately wants an extradition treaty with Canada. Okay, well, if you want one with us, then you have to respect the one that we have with the United States. But they don't want to do that. So they arrested, or kidnapped, as I like to call it, Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, and said, we're holding these people until you let Meng Wanzhou go. Why do they want to do that? Because they don't want her going on trial in the United States for subverting sanctions against the country the country we were just talking about, Iran. And, because that could open up Huawei to all kinds of questions about their financial dealings, about their technological dealings with a regime that is on the outskirts, on the outside of where the Western liberal democracies are in this world. It could cause them an awful lot of embarrassment. They don't want that, so they want to do anything they can, both as a company and as a country, to stop that. We shouldn't be giving into that. And yet, unfortunately, Eddie Goldenberg, Chrétien's former chief of staff, has talked about this. Chrétien has talked about it. John Manley has talked about it. Thankfully, some of those around Chrétien have also said, this is a dumb idea and we shouldn't do it. That's where I stand.
Brian, former Quebec Premier Jean Charest says he is now no longer interested in seeking the federal Conservative leadership. Did former PM Stephen Harper maybe help influence his decision a little bit?
I don't actually think so. Look, I talked to an awful lot of people that are close to Stephen Harper after that story came out that said Stephen Harper resigned as one of the members of the Conservative Fund of Canada board. That's the fundraising arm of the Conservative Party, so that he could spend his time trying to take on Jean Charest and make sure that he didn't become leader of the Conservative Party. And they said, yeah, he doesn't really like the idea of Jean Charest becoming Conservative leader, but that's not why he resigned. It was getting in the way of business. It was taking up an increasing amount of time for Stephen Harper to sit on this volunteer board. It was not good for business. It was not good for the party because the party has to eventually move on from its founding leader. And so there were an awful lot of people, both inside the party and out, saying Harper needed to go. Charest ended up leaving for a couple of reasons. And in the interview that he gave to French CBC, that should tell you everything you need to know. Where did the guy that wanted to lead the Conservative Party go when he wanted to talk about why he's not running? The Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. If you're going to go there, maybe you shouldn't be looking to lead the Conservative Party of Canada. But what did he talk about? He said, well, I'm kind of offside of them on the environment and on guns. He could have massaged his position on the environment. He was Brian Mulroney's he was Canada's first environment minister. He could have massaged that and found a way to make it work. He would have had to have walked back his position on gun control. But here's the real reason that Jean Charest is not running. There was a court decision last week that there was a former lead fundraiser for the Quebec Liberal Party who wanted to make sure that his emails and his communications trying to raise money for the Quebec Liberal Party were not made public. And the court said, no, these can be made public. Those are damning to Charest. In addition to the fact that he was a lobbyist for Huawei, trying to argue the same position as Eddie Goldenberg and John Manley, which is not popular with Canadians, these emails show people acting in his name in a very unsavory manner, trying to get money for the Quebec Liberal Party. You can get a metro, subway contract, or you can get a highway contract. Just donate enough money, you'll get a contract. That's not how we want to be doing politics in Canada, and that's what did Jean Charest in.
So who are the front runners right now? Peter MacKay and maybe Pierre Poilievre?
Really, there's, I guess, four names that have said they're interested or going to run, and that's Peter MacKay, Pierre Poilievre, Erin O'Toole, and Marilyn Gladu. Marilyn Gladu is the only woman. Now, I want to make this clear. None of them are officially candidates, because to do that, you have to give the party, I believe it's a $25,000 deposit and 1,000 names. And then you got to give another $25,000. Eventually it becomes $300,000 and 3,000 names that you've got to give them. None of them have come close to doing any of that. Marilyn Gladu is trying to raise her profile. She doesn't really have a hope of winning this at this point. Erin O'Toole went from 0 to 3rd place in the last election. Pierre Poilievre is running as the true blue Conservative. And Peter MacKay at this point is kind of running as the front runner, because he was, of course, one of the founding members of the modern Conservative Party, the last leader of the PC Party, and a key cabinet minister for Stephen Harper during his entire time in office. So, for people that want to make that red Tory reform divide, it's tough to do that with Peter MacKay because he was so integral to Stephen Harper's government.
Brian, as we reported on Bridge City News, the United States has now ratified the new NAFTA deal, but Canada hasn't yet, and I assume that will change with Parliament resuming next week?
Yes, so apparently the government will introduce a Ways and Means motion to ratify the USMCA, new NAFTA, USMACA, CUSMA, whatever you want to call it. They want to bring it into effect next week. So on Monday, January 27th, a Ways and Means motion will be introduced. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out, because the NDP, of course, is opposed to it. The Bloc is wishy-washy. The Conservatives had been supportive of it, but now they don't really have a leader. Andrew Scheer is going to have difficulty whipping his vote. The Conservatives do have some legitimate concerns, despite being the party of free trade, some legitimate concerns about changes that have been made by the Democrats in the U.S., or concessions that Trudeau made during the original negotiation. So will it pass? That's not as clear-cut. Likely it will, but it's not as clear-cut as it was, say, 4 months ago.
Prince Harry is back in Canada with his lovely wife Meghan and their wonderful son Archie. Now, Brian, you've written that Harry should become our next Governor General. Why is that?
Well, I said he would be a better governor general than the astronaut who's currently holding the office. And, I would like to say no disrespect to Julie Payette, but let's face it, she's shown disrespect for the office. The woman that currently holds the office shows no interest in doing the duties that are required of it. She actually has bristled at showing up for things like signing a bill into royal assent. Well, that's one of your main jobs when you're governor general. They wanted a ceremony to, bring the legalization of marijuana into law. They want to have a ceremony for that. She refused to show up, which meant the Supreme Court Chief Justice had to do it. Well, that's not quite the same. Whether you agree with the legalization of marijuana or you disagree with it, the job of the governor general isn't to pick sides. The job of the governor general is to do the job, the ceremonial duties. So she's refused to do that. Meanwhile, she's out lobbying for Canada to get a seat on the UN Security Council because Justin Trudeau wants it. Well, that's not her job either. Ambassadors are showing up to present their credentials, and she's saying, "Are you going to vote for Canada?" Well, you're an ambassador presenting your credentials. You can't do anything until the governor general gives their approval. And she's saying, "Are you going to vote for Canada?" That puts them in a bad position. She's not doing a good job. Unfortunately, due to the agreement with the Queen that came out over the weekend, it looks like this is unlikely to be even a possibility because Prince Harry will not be allowed to represent the monarchy in any way. It would have to be an extra, I guess, exception to the deal they came up with. But he would do a better job than the astronaut.
Canadian Tire has been taking on some bad publicity lately for accepting $2.7 million from Ottawa to install electric vehicle charging stations. Now, Brian, this reminds me a little bit of the Loblaws fiasco, accepting millions for their new fridges.
Well, I mean, doesn't that make you think of that immediately? I mean, Loblaws. Look, I shop at Loblaws on a regular basis. I bought a steak there earlier today. Love Loblaws. I have no issue with the company, but why do you? Very profitable. You're taking all my money for the food. You got all the food. Why do you need money for your fridges? They took a lot of heat for that. Now Canadian Tire, another one of my favorite stores. You just walk in, you smell the tires, you smell all the man stuff. Uh, you're taking $2.7 million to install electric vehicle charging stations. If this is the wave of the future, Canadian Tire should be doing it on its own. That's what they did when they started close to 100 years ago, when they developed the idea of Canadian Tire, of service centers, of gas stations, of places to buy automotive parts, and, well, now virtually anything else. So why do they need government money now? On the one hand, I'm upset at them. On the other hand, I'm reminded of the story of the BlackBerry CEO. Justin Trudeau went out to BlackBerry's facility in Canada, in Ottawa's West End, and they have a self-driving car facility there. A bunch of engineers trying to make cars drive without you or I behind the wheel, which may be good or bad thing. And the CEO was asked, "Well, did you need this $40 million?" And he said, "No, but they were offering it, so I took it." So I kind of think maybe Loblaws and Canadian Tire in that position is like, well, I didn't need the money, but the government's going to give it to me. I'll take it. I think you and I might do the same.
Absolutely. If we had our own businesses, yeah, bring the handouts. We'll definitely take it. Toronto journalist Brian Lilley, thanks a lot for your time today.
Do you have 2.7 million for me, Hal?
Yeah. I'll write you a check.
All right.
It's on the way. Thanks again, Brian.
Thank you.